Are you curious about the unknown, the unexplainable? Do you find yourself intrigued by the mysterious and paranormal side of our world? Join us on an adventure into the world of inexplicable discoveries and investigations that may someday give us the final answer as to what may be behind the veil of reality. The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's time once again for Let's Find Out with Diego. The universe is waiting for you.
The borders of space and time have opened once again and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia. It's another episode of Let's Find Out with Diego. Thank you for taking this journey with me. On this episode of Let's Find Out, our guest's journey with paranormal experiences began at the young age of 2. From that initial encounter, he embarked on a series of paranormal encounters throughout his teenage years. In his early 20s, he discovered the extraordinary ability to channel, engage in captivating sessions with friends, with a unique gift to sense spirits lingering nearby. Our guest ventures into the realm of astral travel effortlessly. What sets him apart is not just one, but 3 near-death experiences shaping a life intricately woven in the mystical whispers of the unknown. All this plus more. Please welcome to Let's Find Out Paranormal Investigator and fellow podcaster, Michael Kopf. Michael, my friend, welcome to Let's Find Out. I've been looking forward to having you on the show for a while now, my friend.
Yes, thank you for having me, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, man, a fellow podcaster, and I've been following you for quite a while. You're doing your thing on YouTube and Rumble, and it's hard work, but it's worth it. Sharing these experiences and the stories from the wonderful guests that we book on these shows. But one of the things, and I think we discussed this during our pre-interview, is we have a few things in common. Now, it's a small number of things, but still, it's wonderful because your experiences go as far back, almost like me. I started right about 2 or 3 years old, but you also go back to the age of 2. So I don't know how quite to explain it, how someone would remember something that far back, but what do you remember at such a young age?
So, what I remembered at first was just the fact that I had a mark on my eyebrow where there was never hair there, and I was like, it always made me wonder why I never grew hair there. That's just, to me, was so weird, and I was like, okay, so, and family, is just like, oh, well, you probably bumped it or something. And so then later on in life, like when I became a teenager, I had a flash memory kind of dream state where I saw myself in what I thought was the attic and found out it was the second story of our home. And I was leaning over a vent opening, and next thing I know, I'm in the vent and hit the ground and nothing, no broken bones, no torn ligaments or muscle damage or anything. I basically got up and walked away. And I remembered seeing a wire nick my eyebrow. And so I was like, oh, so that's why I have no hair there on my eyebrow. Cool. And then I remember having a conversation now at this point with an entity and saying, okay, I do want to stay. Now, if I stay, I need to have these abilities, I want to have these abilities at this age and this time, and how are we going to bring them in and everything. And I realized at this moment, I was like, what 2-year-old has this conversation? And how am I having this conversation going from the second story to the first story to a basement in a shaft that is a straight drop? So I was like, I had to be pulled out of time because the conversation, just thinking about it, took longer than the fall to the ground. And then later on, I was doing one of my shows, and Catherine Sorlos in Greece picked up on it. And she is a wonderful medium and works with kids and everything. And she's in Greece and I'm here in Texas, and we had never met. And she starts picking up on me and she goes, "What happened to you when you were 2?" So I started telling her the story, and I said, "Oh, I fell into a shaft." And she goes, "Sweetheart, you didn't fall. That entity pulled you in by accident. They grabbed your arms, and that's why you went in." And I was like, "What?" And then she goes, "And a second entity came, and that's the one you talked to." I was like, "Oh, cool." So I was saved from this supposed bad entity then. And they put me down. And then after hearing that, my mom goes, "Well, you do know it was wintertime, so you were bundled up in your winter clothes." So now I add that part to the story. And I recently told the story on a episode of the show, and I was like, I heard my mom in the back of my mind saying, people are going to hear this and wonder what kind of parents leave a vent open while, doing this. And I was like, so then I was like, yes, there was a board over the vent opening, and the spirit that pulled me in moved it so that I would fall in. And the guest that I was talking with goes, this is starting to sound like this is one of those moments in life that had to happen this way, because look at where you're at now. And so if that event never happened, would you be doing what you're doing? And I was like, that's a really good question.
That's a great observation by that person. But let me ask you this, going back to this entity. Can you recall what it looked like, what it sounded like?
So to me, it was white with bluish tint to it, kind of a whitish bluish light entity. And to me, it sounded like it was speaking perfect English. And in my last episode where I was talking with the lady about it, she goes, not only is it incredible that, you had this conversation at 2, but you could understand the being. And I was like, well, yeah, it sounded like they were speaking English, or I guess I'm assuming they were speaking English, and maybe they weren't, and I just was able to apparently telepathically communicate with them. But either way, she was like, that's a second amazing thing from your experience, is that you could understand and communicate clearly with this entity. And I was like, yeah, I never thought about it, but you're right.
Wow. So from the time that you were communicating with that entity, do you still communicate with it? Has it lingered around your whole life, or did it eventually move on to where it needs to go?
That's an interesting question, because I have a lot of entities that are around me all the time. I kind of jokingly call them my entourage. And people will jokingly say, "Oh, you come with your entourage." And so, to be honest, I'm not sure if they're around anymore, if that was like a one-time thing. But I will say one thing that's interesting that came of this is Catherine pointed out that I have a unique protection around me. So, like, entities can't attach to me really easily, and I can walk into buildings where most people would be afraid to enter because of the energy. And so I had this protection around me. And I had another guest who was like, I can see around you, there's this purple color with these golden symbols that I've never seen, but it feels like it's good, but it's like a protection around you. And so I was like, I got validation there. And then another guest goes, you have energy around you that's like a tornado that's keeping you safe. I have never seen this. And I'm like, yeah. And I didn't have the heart to say, well, I've been protected since I was 2. So probably that's what that was. But I've never heard it described as tornado. And it's interesting how everyone sees it differently. And so that spirit could very well still be around, but it just doesn't make itself known anymore to me.
And that's fair to say, since I guess you go in there with your whole entourage. I guess they take turns making themselves known to you. But with these entities and the way they gravitate towards you, does this have any relation to the 3 separate near-death experiences you've had?
I think it has to do with the fact that I grew up in a metaphysical way over the dogmatic way. And what I mean by that is, ironically, is a funny story, is I would go to church with my parents as a little kid. And you know how kids are at church. They're squirming, they're talking and, being a little disruptive, but not to the point you need to take them outside. And, well, my experience was I would be there for everyone's talking. And then as soon as the priest would get up to give his sermon, I was asleep. And as soon as he was done, I would wake up. No joke. My mother thought it was the funniest thing. She was like, she'd look over, and as soon as he got up to the pulpit, I would fall right to sleep. And they would say, well, did you hear what they were talking about? I was like, no, I didn't hear a single word. I never heard anything the priest had to say from the pulpit. And so I was talking with my guides through a medium as a teenager, and I said, I stopped attending church because you guys, or for some reason, I would fall asleep during the sermon. And they go, and I can imagine hearing them laughing while they're saying this, is going, we put you to sleep. We didn't want you to learn the dogma. So we put you to sleep during that part of the service to protect you. And I was like, oh, thank you. And so that's where I feel like, because I grew up around people who would channel or exposed to mediums like John Edwards. I'd watch his show, and I met him once. And being around that, I think, is why spirits gravitate towards me over the near-death experience. I'm sure that had something to do with it too, but I feel like because I don't have the mainstream religion telling me this, you shouldn't be able to do this, you can't do that. They were like, hey, he's receptive, he's open, let's go hang out there.
Sure, I guess, because if you have that gate open, they're going to enter. And I'm going to touch back again on these entities, because it could be different types. And I'm going to use general terms here. Are these entities now, are they human, or are they spirits, non-human spirits, or could they be extraterrestrial?
I feel like they're, as I would describe them, is extraterrestrial or star beings. I know I have those around. I feel those. I would say non-human because, again, if you have extraterrestrial star beings, most of those are classified as non-human, so I could say that. And human would be is I have family that's on the other side that watches over me and guides me sometimes, so they're around. And I have, and I'm not sure how to classify it, but growing up in metaphysics, we're taught you have like spirit guides and life guides that they come and go depending on where you're at in your life. So, for example, is if I'm going into corporate America, I'll have a life guide that's experienced in corporate America to help guide me through it so I don't get absorbed and lost and go down the wrong path. Whereas if I became an artist, corporate America isn't going to be able to help me, so they'll step aside and let an artist guide come in and say, hey, here's what you need to do with your art. I'm going to help you stand behind your art, and we're going to make a living at this and, guide you along the way. So we have those. And I actually was thinking about this the other day is, the difference between a guide and a guardian angel, because both of them are here. And what I finally decided the main difference is, like I said, guides come and go depending on what you're needing, what you're focused on in life. But your guardian angels are always there and always nudging you along. So to me, that's, if there is a difference, that would be it. Is one is always there, one comes and goes.
And with your experiences, are these guardian angels or spirits, can they be assigned just to one person, or do they deal with multiple people?
I think so simply put, I would say they could help everyone. And the reason I say that and why I hesitated is there is an guardian angel guide for everyone. But if you don't ask for it, they don't help you or they don't interfere. They have to be asked. That's like a universal law. So if you don't ask and you're around somebody who has asked, they're not going to, if a situation arises, only help the one. They'll help both because you're in the energy field. So that's why I say they'll help as many as they can, but they're also, I believe, are for the individuals. It's just like I was mentioning, it's, do you ask for the help or do you sit there and go, you know what, I'm going to struggle through life because that's what humans do.
That's very true. Sometimes, even thousands of years, we still choose to struggle for some reason instead of learning from what happened in the past. And one of the reasons that I mentioned could have been possibly extraterrestrial, because there are those that believe, and I'm one of them, and I have the opinion of that sometimes they follow families for the generations, and perhaps I like to call it like these families are tagged, and perhaps they dispatch certain types of extraterrestrial to follow them along the bloodline from start to finish. I'm thinking that might be a possibility. I don't know, but going back to the extraterrestrial part of this, because you have had experiences with actually witnessing and seeing these things in the skies at least 5 occasions, correct?
Correct.
So where where was the first your first experience with these, and where were you?
So the one that I talk about the most was I was at work and I was collecting funds for an organization, and I was doing kind of fundraising work, and I was gathering donations outside, and I had ended my shift, and they were like, okay, everyone needs to come back to the office. And so I was like, all right. And so I'm over by a highway, so I don't hear anything, but the cars going by, and I get this feeling I need to look up. And I look up, and there's this object hovering between two light poles above the tree line. And I'm like, I think that's a UFO because I don't hear the plane engines, which you can hear those over the traffic. And it appears to be hovering, but maybe it's because I'm looking at it right now and the optical illusion is it's standing still. So I start taking down all my stuff, and I go inside and let the business know that I'm leaving the front and thank them for letting me stand out there and do what I was doing. And I walk to my car, put stuff away, and I'm about to open the car door, and I'm like, I wonder. And I look up, still there, same place, still not hearing anything. And I'm like, that's a UFO. Because we don't have any planes that I'm aware of that can hover in place for, this is like 5 minutes. It's like, and why would they? This is a city. We're not near a military base. We're not near an airport. So there's like no reason this plane should be hovering there. And I took photos of it, and every time I would zoom in, it just appears to be a long strip with like a piece that goes up, like the tail fin. And so I was like, it doesn't really look like a plane either, but it's off in the distance, so maybe could be a plane. But to me, I feel like it wasn't a plane because it just didn't act like anything I'd ever seen, and there was no blinking lights on it.
And 5 minutes hovering, that's a pretty long time for a UFO sighting.
Right, and I mean, I'm surprised it stayed there because I'm like I said, I walked into a building, I was like ignoring it for probably 4 of those minutes, and I was like, wow, you're still there. And I think that's why I took my cell phone out and took photos, because I was like, you're still there. This doesn't seem natural. I'm going to document this. And to be honest, I couldn't even tell you if when I got in the car after that and drove towards where they were to get on the highway, I couldn't even tell you if it was still there. I don't think I looked because I was like, I feel like they probably were there to be seen, and since they felt they were seen and documented, they were good. I was happy. They were probably happy. We're all good.
Yeah, I guess they made their point. Say, hey, I'm here, Michael. We're still watching you, making sure you're doing good. No, I'm making light of it. But, you've had 5 separate occasions where you've seen UFO activity. But with your history, starting from 2 years old into teenager, your 20s, and you're seeing UFOs, and now we're moving on to the part of your life where now you're actually doing these investigations on not only on your own but with teams as well. So when was the first time you actually decided to start when you became a paranormal investigator?
So that actually is a funny story. Is I was in a Facebook group, which I still am on, and it's called Ghost Ship Hunters 360. And we would talk in the group about, ghost ships, or other type of paranormal activity. If there was like a ship that had no crew came in, we're like, well, that's a ghost ship, but is it when is it? What's its story? So we'd look it up or we'd share if a ship was found that was underwater and being like, hey, we finally found this ship and other shipwrecks. And so it was like my exposure to paranormal research and sharing claims and being like, chiming in going, yeah, that's paranormal, or nah, I'm not so sure that's paranormal and not just, a natural occurrence. Sorry. I don't have enough to make a true evaluation. And we would also joke in the group about, if we're in a haunted location and we hear our name called, or we see an apparition form, are we going to stay or are we going to run? And so I'd always say, I'm going to stay. And my friend that created the group was like, nope, I'm running. I'll see you at the pub and I'll be drinking while you guys are doing your thing. And so we laugh about that. And I was at a weekend deal for an organization I was a part of doing meetings, and my phone buzzes. And I'm like, how am I getting a Facebook message? We are in the worst Wi-Fi zone ever. I'm lucky if I get a text message. And I get to my room because we're done for the night, and someone is asking me if I want to join a paranormal team. And I'm like, yeah, you guys are messing with me. This ain't real. I'm not TV star. I don't have a portfolio to be on TV. This ain't real. And they're like, no, we really are. We really do investigate. And, we're getting ready to go to an investigation real soon. And I was like, yeah, all right, let's do it. And I was like, if you're for real, yeah, I'd love to do this. Because, like I said, I only seen it on TV. And I thought that's, how many times do we see what's on TV is something that really happens?
Right.
So that's how I got my start, and my first investigation happened to be the famous Yorktown Memorial Hospital.
On your first investigation?
My very first.
Well, I have to ask, how did that go?
So to me, it could have went better, but that's my own fault because I was at this point thinking, okay, if this is going to be, I'm doing this, I need to treat it like work, so I got to take it serious. We're going to, document it. I basically would do walkthrough and take photos in every room, and I was treating it like work, like I would my job. And I was like, I'm kind of sensing some stuff going on, but I'm not totally trusting, my senses and going, am I just getting into the hype of this location or is stuff really going on? And so I left there feeling like, yeah, there probably was some activity, but I wouldn't conclusively say, oh my God, this is a haunted place. Now, with that being said, I did end up investigating there 5 times. And the reason I tell people you got to do location more than once is you never get the same thing twice. Or it's really rare to, and some nights it may be less active than other nights. And so I was fortunate when I went back and had different experiences, so I can say now, yes, Yorktown Memorial Hospital is haunted, and there is some weird stuff that goes on there. But what actually, I met two of the Tennessee Ray Chasers and at an event, and I had to tell them the story. Was I was doing every investigation, like I mentioned, seriously. And I was not getting a lot of anything. It's like I might get some orbs, nothing that I could hang my hat on. And I was watching Haunted Live. And it's the episode where they hazed a new member. And I go, oh my God, they're having fun. This is a professional team. Why am I not doing that? I should totally be doing that. And so I started approaching investigations after that with more fun and laughter and everything. And all of a sudden, I started getting more and more evidence. And I was like, okay, so paranormal field is not a normal business. You have to have fun. And you have to be the complete opposite of corporate America to make it as a paranormal investigator.
And with the evidence, whether it's photo or audio, where are you cataloging these things at?
So I keep them on a hard drive on my computer, and if it's something I feel like is, in my opinion, undeniable, like EVP, that clearly is not, you couldn't look at it and go, oh, that's her, or that's him. That I will post onto YouTube and make a video of and say, hey, here's evidence I caught. And on my YouTube channel, in the very beginning, I was so worried about people saying, oh, this is faked, or you faked this, that I would put the whole 2-hour, 3-hour video of the investigation on YouTube and say, here's the investigation. And people would say, well, where's the evidence? And I'd go, watch it. And they're like, I'm not watching 3 hours on the off chance you got something. And I was like, well, I'm not editing it because I don't want people to think I, have edited and faked something. And they go, no, you don't edit it like that. You simply trim it to what it is and put a card in front of it that says, here's this. Or do a voiceover before it comes on and saying, here's this. And I was like, ew, I didn't realize that. So then I started editing and trimming videos down to, here's the evidence. And I was still putting up the full investigation if they wanted to see it for themselves in full, to see that I wasn't faking it. And then I was like, you know what? I don't have time for this anymore. So here's the evidence. Skip the full. And the other thing I did was, so in Mineral Wells, I have a friend named Shauna Lee Anderson. And she is new to the paranormal field, and she does haunted houses. She actually owns Texas Scaregrounds, which is a really popular haunted attraction in October. And I met her doing an investigation at the old Nazareth Hospital before it was closed, and we became really good friends. And she decided when the Nazareth closed, she was going to a new location, and she saw the potential and said, I don't know if this is haunted or not. I don't want to say it's haunted if it's not. So she had, I like to coin it as, the wisdom to take the investigators that she resonates with and trusts, put them together, and we call ourselves the tribe. And we will go and we get to step foot on the property before any other investigator. and we spend a few hours there. And our task is this paranormal or not? Is there activity or not? And if not, are we going to be honest? And she knows we are. And so, thankfully, so far, everywhere she's picked has been active, but it's really nice to feel that appreciated in the field, because there are those of us who have been in the field 5-6 years. I've been in it 4 years now. Some people, are in it for over 10 years. But we all sit there together and have equal input and are like, yeah, we had this, we had that. I would definitely say, something's here, or I don't know. I can kind of explain that off. And it's like, yeah, you're right. I get what you're saying. And so we work well. We actually end up working well together. But it's just really cool, though, to be able to be trusted enough to say, stake your livelihood on what we say.
Yeah. But you say you only been doing the investigations for 4 years? That's not that long.
No. But the difference is, is it 4 years? I started, 2019, I believe, is when I had my first investigation. Well, let me see. I just happen to have that.
I think it might be 6 years if my calculator's working right in my brain, but it might not be. I'm not really good with math, but
I'm not good at math either. But
well, that's okay. Because what I'm saying is,
2019 is when I started, and so 2019 to 2024. So okay, 6 years. So just add 2 years to everybody's thing, because I don't keep track of that really, but it's been short. But in that 6 years, I have over 100 investigations under my belt. So I went and I would do group investigations. I would do scouting investigations. I would do investigation with teams. I'd leave a team, start with another team, leave that team, go to another team, because one is I don't like drama. And so if a team starts getting too much drama, I'll step out. And one team I was like being helpful to someone and they interpreted it as something else and were like, you're out. And I was like, okay. And I was like, I felt it was unfair, but what are you going to do? And so I just was like, you know what, I'm just going to keep going and keep investigating, and met a lot of great friends along the way. And I still talk with most of them, and I have had the unfortunate of saying goodbye to a few locations. And that's kind of sad to see a location go by, especially when you get a lot of great activity there and you feel like you're not done yet with that location, but your hands are tied. So it's like, yeah, but it is sombering too, because one example of where it's sombering is I was there when we decided Fort Walters military base was haunted. So Shauna was promoting it out, and I would make videos of evidence for her. Like if I got an EVP there, I would send a clip of it to her saying, hey, here's, for your advertising. And if we caught a image of something, we would send it to her and she would use it for promoting purposes. And so we were constantly helping each other. And unfortunately, those of us who were there when the doors opened, 3 of us were back, and we were joined. Well, actually, 4 of us were back, and one person joined us that was fairly new to the location. And we got to do one more walkthrough. And when we left, we got to say goodbye to all the spirits, thank them, and say, we'll look forward to you guys coming to where we're going to if there's a new spot, or if this is the end of it. We appreciate the spirits, and we gave them a really good thank you. And I felt it was a really beautiful way to say goodbye to the location. And being the first and last person to investigate it, there's a little somberness to it.
Yeah, because I guess you could just get attached to that location in a way where you've grown accustomed to it, and then just leave, it makes you sad. Like you're talking about that. And so let me ask you, because I promised you I was going to ask you this question, because very interesting. You started at a young age with the experiences, later in life as an investigator. But let me ask you this question. When did this ability to astral project start? And how does that process work?
So it's actually astral projection. I'm not sure I would define what I do as astral projection. I can astral travel. Well, I guess it's the same thing in a way. When I think of projection, I think of putting an image somewhere, and I'm like not really projecting an image somewhere, but my energy is going there. So yeah, I guess projection does work. So yeah, there you go. Learned a new term. But so to answer your question, the longest way I can think of right now, covering my little mental conversations that I usually keep to myself. So there you go. You're privy to one of those.
Awesome.
So I was actually born with it. As long as I can remember, I've had dreams of being in other worlds and being able to just, when I sleep, go out of body and be somewhere else. And it was like, it just seemed natural. And to be honest, I totally thought everybody could do it. And I never really thought it was something unique until people would come up to me and they're like, "You astral travel?" I'm like, "Yeah." "I haven't figured it out. How do you do it?" I'm like, "I just do it. I'm sorry. I can't explain it. It's just something I just do." And I know that sounds arrogant, and believe me, it's frustrating for me because I really want to help, but I'm also the type personality of I'm not going to make something up. So if I don't know a way to teach how to astral project, I don't ever teach and say to somebody, "Oh, you do this and then you should be able to do it." I'm like, no, I don't ever say I can do something I can't do.
And during your astral travels, what type of locations are you going to?
So I have been to other galaxies, other planets. I think I might even have gone to other dimensions because things just operate differently. And one thing to realize is when you're astral traveling or projecting, if you think it, you can do it, is the motto that I have come to learn. And what I mean by that is if I go Andromeda Galaxy, what does that look like? And I'm sleeping, I will automatically go and be like, so this is the Andromeda Galaxy, okay. And we travel, but in my opinion, as whatever you're comfortable with is how you travel. And so for me, I've grown accustomed to traveling by the speed of thought. So if you think about it, it takes a nanosecond or two to have a thought. In that 1 or 2 nanoseconds, I can be somewhere. That's how fast you can do it. And at the same time, if you go, well, Jupiter is really far, it's going to take me a while. You'll astral travel to the point you'll get there, but it may take you like 10 minutes versus being able to do it in a second. And so how I went back and thought about it, and I never figured out how to get out of body, like how I do the out of body. But when I first started and I coined it for myself of getting my astral legs, is I would zip up to Ra's ship, the Egyptian god, meet Isis, talk, have a conversation, and then be like, okay. And then I remember seeing near the moon are these pads that are just floating there. And you pretty much, the best way to describe those pads, I would think, is if you played video games and you know how some of them, if you hit that spot, it would like rev up and then you'd like zip off. Well, that's what those pads were, is you would stand there and then your energy would get to the point where it would like boost you to where you were going. So I could go to Mars, or I could go to Pluto, or galaxy that's on the other end of space as we know it. And that's the thing, is you got to realize when you're traveling, if you can think it and trust yourself, you can do it. That's the other thing. If you sit there and you start saying, oh, I'm out of body, and okay, Paris is looking really cool, but there's no way I can go off planet. You're not going to go off planet. That's how powerful the mind is if you put limitations on what you can do over there, the mind is going to make that reality. Now, with that being said, there are some patches, just like here, there are some zones or areas in astral world, so to speak, where they're called shadow zones, or that's what I call them, as shadow zones. And those are not places you want to go. Shadow zones are where, like, if you imagine seeing someone who's really jovial, happy, really uplifted, and always on like cloud nine, and they astral travel. And all of a sudden, the next day, you're like, hey, I haven't heard from this person. They're always the first person to text me in the morning. Well, maybe they're busy. Well, it's been the afternoon. I haven't heard from this person. And that night you go over there and they are like, hey. And you're like, what's wrong? Why aren't you your bubbly self? Chances are they probably stumbled into a shadow zone on the astral. And what it does is it's like the shadow beings that live there will latch on and just drain the energy off, drain the life essence. And they will, And as soon as you get too low, they might actually let you go so that you can recharge yourself and then latch back on because you're still in there. Or they may just take and go all the way, and that's why some people may not wake up the next day. And that is something I want to make understood as well, is if in the astral world or when you're astral traveling and you encounter a being, and that being and you get into a fight, you'll wake up with bruises. And you may wake up with cut marks that you didn't know you didn't have when you went to sleep, because what happens to you in astral does appear in the body. Now, a cut mark may appear, it depends on how severe it is, but most likely when I say a cut mark will be there is, say you got your arm cut along here. Anytime you touch it, it's going to be extremely tender, as if it's trying to heal. And so you're going to be like, well, why is my arm hurt there? Because it's not cut or anything, but it feels like it is. You probably got cut on your arm in the astral. So you do have to be careful. It's not just hey, let's go to Jupiter. Hey, let's go to Mars. Hey, let's just zip around. There are beings that are benevolent and there are malevolent beings out there. So you just got to watch it and trust yourself to stay in the safe areas.
And that's true, because the same thing can be said when you're out there doing research in the woods. You're exploring the woods looking for Bigfoot, Dogman, or any type of cryptids. You might encounter some that may run, may hide, or you might encounter something that may want to, give you a good beating. I would say, kind of like when you're astral traveling and, they might cause you physical harm. Now, you should be very well prepared before you even go on that type of a journey. But on a different note, a different type of journey that doesn't hurt as much, something you and I also have in common with podcasting, and is listening to the great stories these guests when they come on our show. And so I know you have a lot of shows, you do a lot of things. What are the names of some of the shows that you're doing right now?
So on Tuesday nights at 9 o'clock Central Time, I do The Energy That Surrounds Us, which is primarily my paranormal show, where I will have guests on who paranormal investigate or wrote some books on some interesting topics. And when I say paranormal for this show, I used to, when I first started it, keep it defined as ghost hunting and ghost equipment, and thinking, okay, locations, that's the paranormal. Well, when I wrote an article for an online newsletter, and I thought, a lot of people ask me, what's the paranormal? What does it mean? And I was like, maybe I should write an article, really do find out. And in writing this article, the very basic definition, even if you look it up online on a dictionary, sums up as anything unexplained. Well, in that moment, my mind blew open, and I was like, man, I could be talking about these topics, such as portals, stargates, UFOs, all of that. I was like, man. And so I took in my show and decided, yeah, I'm going to, because I love the title being The Energy That Surrounds Us, because everything is energy. Therefore, if I go and do an episode on UFOs, I'm not leaving the scope of the show. It's like I feel like I'm still staying true to the show. And so then on Wednesdays, I try to do 8 o'clock Central Time. 3 times a month now, I do what I call a series, and it's entitled Writing Through the Unknown. This series is my personal journey and my bringing guests on, and we discuss disclosure and the esoteric side of the world. And what that means is, so disclosure, I describe it as, we talk about UFOs. Well, are they ours? Or are they the black ops, government? Or are they ETs? UFOs. Whose crafts are they? What did we witness? Who made it? And get into some conspiracy type discussions around that, which I've always been interested in, but I never really thought people would listen to me sharing that. And boy, was I wrong. People are gravitating towards it. And my first guest on the series was Brad Olson, and he has a trilogy of books on the esoterics. And I always thought that was some kind of special science or something. And he kind of laughed when I said, "What does esoteric mean?" And he kind of laughed and he goes, "It just means it's something that's been hidden from the public." And I was like, "Oh, well, that kind of summates a lot of what I talk about on this show." So I was like, I got an esoteric series. And
That's awesome. Sometimes it's just like that. You get something new and you jump on it.
yeah. And I'm really careful on that show and on the energy that surrounds us, to when I'm bringing guests on, to make sure, one, what they're talking about, they really have experienced and they really are, willing to talk about it. Because, as you know, as a show host, when we have a guest on, we're putting our own reputation on the line. And so if we have a guest on that's, tells us, "Hey, I've been to, say, for example, I've been to, say, Area 51," and we're like, "Great, I'd love to hear your stories on it." And you start interviewing the person and they're like, "Yeah, we were at the gate and, we did this and this and this." And you go, "Wait, so you didn't actually cross the gate?" "Well, no." I'm like, "You told me you were on Area 51. Wait a minute." And you're like, yeah, you have just now lost potential audience, because they're like, "Wait a minute, this guy just had this clown on."
No.
And people will start to question other shows. So we try to do our homework as best we can to prevent that from happening. And one thing I will say about both communities, being the disclosure, esoteric community, and the paranormal community, is when you have guests that have been on and you kind of resonated together, and they do shows, or they, are really popular and been around a lot longer than you have, they'll message you on the side and say, "Hey, are you sure you want to have this person on?" And they watch out for you and help you out. And I love that about the community, because they know it's your show and you can do what you want, but they're like, "Hey, just, a little heads up about, this person or that group." And it's like, you appreciate that they're willing to, help you out and keep you honest. And one of the things that is a funny story that I'm leading to, because we were talking backstage and, about having 3 shows that I'm a part of, is the third show has a really funny origin. So the host of Paranormal Versus, the original host and creator, her name is Kel, and it was Ridley, but now it's Atkinson. They just got married in July, so excited for them. and so happy for them. And she was doing a show with a friend of mine, and being from the UK, I've come to learn that Northumberland is known as Geordie country, and had no idea what that meant. And we would be talking, and she's like, "Wait, you can understand me?" I'm like, "Yeah, your accent's not a problem for me." And she goes, "Well, what if I start talking really, really fast?" I'm like, "Hey, slow, it's like, I can understand, but you might want to slow it down a little bit. You don't have to go super slow, but I pretty much can still follow along and hear everything." And she's like, "Well, I'm wanting to do a show where we talk about investigating in the UK versus investigating in the US, but I can't find a US host that can understand me." And so I was like, "Well, I can understand you. Do you want to do a show?" And so we were like, I'll do a show with you." And so Paranormal Versus was born. And one of the comical moments of the show is she would be asking her questions, and we're live, and the guest is kind of got this confused look on his face. And I go, "She's asking you this." And he goes, "Oh, okay." So I had to spend the entire episode translating what she was asking to the guest. And we were just having so much. We crack jokes about that. And every once in a while, she's like, guests will be like, "Well, your accent's not that bad. I don't understand." And she'll come up with and go, "Well, there was one guest where I was so grateful to have my co-host over here on, because he had to translate it." I just kind of sit there, nod and smile. I'm like, "Yep, I did."
Now, for the listeners of Let's Find Out, they want to get to know you a little bit better as far as listening to your shows.
So Paranormal Versus is at 3 o'clock Central Time, 9 o'clock UK GMT time. And if you want to catch past episodes or want to catch current episodes, you can find each of my shows that I'm a part of or that I host on Rumble. They're all under their own show channels. And the only difference is the energy that surrounds us. I use the acronym to short it down in Rumble to Tetsu, which ironically I found out is a Japanese word for iron. So that was a fun little caveat to picking that name. And I am on etalk.tv, and I am on Rumble, which I think I mentioned. So I meant to say YouTube, and those are under the show names. And you can find it on Facebook at Paralinks. It's either going to be on One or Plus on either channel. And if you're on Facebook, if you go to Michael Newkoff, that's my profile page, and you can find all the links there. Now, if you don't want to watch video live, you can watch on Spotify, iHeart Podcast, and Acast. And on Pocket Cast, you can watch or listen to every episode after they're live, the replays.
Awesome. And if you don't mind, my friend, I'd like to have you back on the show, because I think we've only hit the tip of the iceberg with not only your experiences, but I'd like to actually spend a little more time with your astral travels, and perhaps you can tell us the next times that you go out there into the universe, if you could just tell us what it is that you saw, and maybe it's a very fascinating thing to learn about. So if you don't mind, man, I'd love to have you back.
I'd be happy to come back anytime.
Thank you, my friend. This has been another excellent episode of Let's Find Out with Diego. Please check us out on all our social media pages, YouTube, and we're also on Rumble. Like, share, and subscribe. Also, Let's Find Out is now on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. Catch the show on Saturdays at 2 a.m. For more information, please visit KGRADB.com. That's KGRADB.com. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Until next time, my friends.
Let's find out with Diego, the power of Diego Mania. All content for Let's Find Out is property of co-host Diego and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, co-host Diego, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.